This is Booked on Rock. I'm Eric Senich. Our guest this episode, Ken Schwartz, author of I May Be Old, But I've Seen All the Cool Bands. One fan's story about why music matters. You've probably read about Led Zeppelin's success in their famous biography, Hammer of the Gods. You watched Queen take over the world in Bohemian Rhapsody. And although you probably won't admit it to your friends, you enjoyed the crazy TV ride in Motley Crüe's The Dirt. Rock bios are all the rage. Lead singers, guitarists, managers, roadies, groupies, even drummers have told their tales. And they all point to the same reason for their success: the fans. This is their story. This is our story. In Ken's biography, I May Be Old, But I've Seen All the Cool Bands, we read the story from the point of view of a lifelong music fanatic. Read how music helped turn a shy kid into an extroverted metalhead, and how a passion for rock can shape anyone's life. And laugh along as you try and understand how anyone could blow off a legend like Whitney Houston. Ken tells that story and a whole lot more in this discussion. For a playlist of the music Ken and I discuss in this interview, head over to the show notes page. Hey, Ken, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it.
Let's start with the foreword of your book, which was written by the great musician, singer, songwriter, and record producer Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells fame. He writes about your father, Red Schwartz, who, as Tommy put it, was the greatest business promotion man there ever was and one of the most important people in his life and career. Can you talk about your dad and his career in the music business? You grew up in Southern California. I'm guessing that was because of your dad's career choice?
Yeah, a little bit. Dad worked on both coasts for a while. I think he finally got tired of the East Coast weather and decided to kind of pack up west before I was born and go work for the record companies out there for a little while. But I got to say, Tommy's family. So he's Uncle Tommy to me. So there was only one person I called to help write the foreword for this book, and I'm so happy and thankful that he did it. But yeah, my dad was in the business for 20 to 30 years. He was a promotions man. He was a DJ. He started off as a DJ. He had his own record company. He did marketing. He did promotion. He did everything. He worked in every part of the industry for about 20 to 30 years. He was really big with the Philadelphia sound. He liked some of the Motown sound, and he liked some of the Latin sound too. He worked with bands like Tito Puente as well. So he was kind of all over the map, just finding good music.
Did he ever think about writing his own book?
You know, he passed away in 2000, and when he passed away, I was going through his stuff and whatnot, and I found like 20 pages of handwritten notes of him starting his own book. And because my dad he hated computers, so it was all handwritten on pen and paper and whatnot. And I really, it's sort of a regret. I kind of wish he sat down and even dictated it to me and told me more stuff about it, and I would have helped him do it. But I think it was a thought later in life, but he never got around to it.
Yeah, that would have been a great read. He had a career in radio as a DJ, worked for many record companies, RCA, Capitol, and even had his own label, Red Top Records. One of the bands they signed was the Blue Notes, which brought us Harold Melvin. He also worked at Roulette Records in New York City. As you write, the famous or notorious Roulette Records, your dad worked with some good people and some bad people, as we know from Tommy Shondells' 2010 book, Me, the Mob, and the Music, which is a must-read. Guys that would, I guess you could say, Goodfellas, Sopranos types behind the closed doors while your dad was doing the legit business in the front room. There they were doing some crazy stuff behind the closed office doors. And you're right, there's a lot that he didn't tell you.
Yeah, definitely a weird time. My dad was, he was straight as an arrow. He was, he never even jaywalked if he didn't have to, So he was an honest guy, and he was the front office guy doing the legitimate business of signing bands while all the shenanigans were going on in the back rooms. And he kept me from most of that, and this all happened way before I was born. But he kept those stories away from me because some of those guys were still around back then. But yeah, he would tell me stories where guys would go in the back and they'd come out bloodied, or the boss would come out with a crate of records and say, "Hey, go drop this off to so and so down the street." Well, should I get a price for those? No, don't ask questions. Let's go drop the records off. So there was some sort of payoff there or something, and stuff like that happened all the time. My dad's boss was Morris Levy, and your listeners can look up Morris Levy. He was the head of Roulette Records, and he was connected, allegedly, to certain families in the Northeast corridor. And, there were always those those payments that, he didn't know where it was coming from or who it was going to, but he made sure that it got there.
Yeah, I'm assuming for your dad, then the less he asked, the better.
Exactly. And yeah, totally that. He just took it, dropped it off, and then went to the club and party. And I'll be honest with you, I'm sure that I met some of these characters, when I was growing up, 6, 7 years old. My dad used to take me to record conventions. I was going for the free music and the stickers and the candy and whatnot, but he would be meeting all his old friends, and he'd always say, "Hey, Ken, come on over here and, meet Mr. So-and-so. Hello, Mr. So-and-so. Nice to meet you." And, I'm sure that was somebody that was connected, but I didn't know. I didn't care at that time. So
they didn't hand you like an envelope with a wad of cash or anything.
No, none of that. Never, ever, ever,
okay.
ever. Yeah. So,
no, tell me about your dad. He swore that he signed the Beatles to VJ Records.
Yeah, he always said he was part of the team. He always kept an eye on music going on, not just in America, but around the world. And he noticed some things happening in Germany, in Hamburg, Germany, with this little British band called the Beatles. And he and his team kind of brought them over to America and signed them to VJ Records. And they put out, I hope I get this right, but they put out Please Please Me, and they put out Love, Love Me Do, which on singles, which is how you promoted records back then, and everything was a single with a B-side. And as my dad used to say, they sold absolutely zero. So somebody made a decision, some bean counter or some head of the office or whatever, and said, these guys, they're not going to sell. Let's cut them. They're not making any special music. So they cut them. And then Capitol picked them up like 2 weeks later, and they put out I Want to Hold Your Hand, and poof. I could be talking to you from my Swiss chalet in the Alps right now, but I'm not. But yeah, he always swore that he never said he was the only one, but he always swore that he was part of the team and had a little bit to do with the early Beatles history.
You write that music has been part of your life since you can remember, but it was Def Leppard and a lovely girl named Alicia who turned you on to rock and roll music. Can you tell this story?
Yeah, so
Alicia, if you're listening.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell your story, my friend. Yeah,
turn up the volume or turn down the volume. I don't know. What do you think?
Growing up, I listened to, kind of whatever radio was shoveling my way at the time, Men at Work and Blondie and stuff like that, which is great. I love that music. But when I was 12 or 13 years old, 1982, 83, my dad and I took a road trip to the East Coast, and we went and saw family in New York and Philly. And then we flew down to Miami to hang with one of his best friends who happened to have a 13-year-old daughter. It's not as tawdry as it sounds, but we were sitting in her room and just talking about music. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I really like Men at Work, and I really like the Thompson Twins and Thomas Dolby and all this stuff. And she's like, okay, cool. I get that. Yeah, they're pretty cool. But have you heard of this band called Def Leppard? No. Well, she goes, well, let me put some on for you and see what you think. And she got out her vinyl, bless her heart. She had it on vinyl, and she put it on, and, the opening chords to Rock Till You Drop came on. And I swear, Eric, I described this in the book, but I swear I had that horror movie moment, although it wasn't a horror movie, but the hallway in her room just got longer and longer and longer. And I can see the future, and, candles were burning and clouds were parting, and it was just wonderful. And I snapped back to reality after a second, and she's just kind of staring at me with a little smile on her face. And I could just tell that she was like, yeah, man, I just blew your goddamn mind, didn't I? So I've been a fan of Def Leppard ever since.
I know exactly how you felt. That is that powerful moment that you become a fan of rock and roll music. And for me, that was Van Halen's 5150 on Christmas Eve of I always get the year wrong, 1988. That same feeling, wow.
Yeah.
So do you go and get all the Def Leppard album? Well, there was only 2 at that time, maybe, or 3?
2. There were the Pyromania was their 3rd. So yeah, I went to Tower Records, and I got all 3 of them. I got them on cassette as well, because I had a cassette player, and I just started playing them over and over and over again. And I think I had to buy some twice because I wore them out so much.
Oh.
So.
I love Def Leppard. We were talking about that through our emails, and so we share that in common among many other bands. But now you mentioned Thomas Dolby. I'm going to test your Def Leppard trivia. Do you know the connection between Thomas Dolby and Def Leppard?
He did keyboards on one of their songs, and I'm struggling to think of which one it was now.
I think he's on that whole album. He's on all of Pyromania, and I think maybe an album before that. His alias is Booker T. Boffin.
That's right. Yeah. I haven't heard that in a while. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, he plays keyboards on synths on, I want to say Pyromania, and maybe even the album before that or the album after, Hysteria. I can't remember. You said you just recently met with their drummer, Rick Allen.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rick, he's such an inspiration. He's a legend. I absolutely love Rick Allen to pieces. I came up through college as a drummer. My dad was a drummer, so I wanted to be a rock drummer. And I have my list of drummers, but Rick Allen has always been an inspiration because of what he's been through. He does a lot of charity work with disabled veterans and young children through his Drum Circle Raven Drum Foundation. He does drum circles and the healing powers of rhythm and music and whatnot. And he's also an accomplished artist, a painter and a sculptor. So I really honestly hate him for being so damn talented. No, I'm just kidding. But he's just amazing. And he had an art show 5 minutes from my house this past weekend. So I went down there and I actually signed my book and gave it to him. So that kind of blew my mind that I'm giving Rick Allen, the drummer for Def Leppard, my book. But the Def Leppard is all through my book. They're on the cover. It was fun to just kind of hang out and pass him the book. And it was only 20 seconds worth of time, but it was just very cool to kind of see him in person again.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And he's got one of the most inspirational stories of all time. And for anybody that may not know this story, Rick lost his arm New Year's Eve, 1983. He lost his left arm after crashing his car. What's so cool about that story is not just his comeback, but his bandmates. The support they gave, they never once considered replacing him. And he's in bed in the hospital wondering, what the hell am I going to do with the rest of my life? And those guys are saying, whatever happens, we got you back.
He begged them. He's like, go find somebody better. Here's a list of 3 or 4 young British drummers that'll be perfect for your band. And they're like, no, man, we got you. Just you heal up and we'll take care of this. And then they put out their biggest album ever. So I love that story so much.
Yeah, Hysteria, 1987. And the great story about his brother brought in the transistor radio into his room just to cheer Rick up. And at first it bummed Rick out. But then when he was listening to the tunes, he started tapping to the songs with those foam pieces that keep the patient from sliding down. Yeah. And he started tapping with it. And that's where he came up with that idea. I can create a drum kit that will replace what I guess his left foot does what the left arm does.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so cool. I envy you that you got to meet him, man. I'd love to get to meet him as well.
Yeah, he's just, like I said, he's an inspiration. I could have had a chance to go to dinner with him and his family if I bought a very expensive piece of art, but I couldn't do that. So maybe in the future, who knows?
That's all right. You got to give him your book. I'm sure he's going to love seeing all the stories in there. Now, one person you did meet, and now my mother's going to probably be listening to this, and she's going to be disappointed in you, Ken. Your Whitney Houston story. My mother loves Whitney Houston, and you had your chance there.
Oh, man, I hesitated putting this in the book, and my wife was like, you gotta put this in the book because everyone will laugh at you, and I want to see that. So I'm like, okay, honey, I'll put it in the book. But yeah, I was 15, 16 years old, and this is actually because of my mom, not my dad. My mom's best friend was married to Don Cornelius, who's the head of Soul Train, who was the Soul Train guy, and They were doing their first ever Soul Train Music Awards back in 1985, 86. And, I was 15 years old and I was a surly ass teenager. And my parents are like, oh, you're going to dress up in a suit and tie and you're going to come to this award show with us. And I'm like, come on, Miami Vice is on tonight. Leave me alone. Just a total jerk or whatever. So we get there early and we go backstage and, mom and dad see people they know, and my dad was really good friends with Dionne Warwick from way back in the day, and Thelma Houston, it turns out. And they're hugging and kissing and, oh, come sit with us. Oh, and Ken, nice to meet you, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm kind of sitting there and I'm slumped and my shoulders are slumped down and I'm picking at the food on my plate. And this beautiful young lady sits down next to me and she's like, hi, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I'm here because of my parents. I don't really want to be here. What are you doing here? She goes, oh, I'm here rehearsing. Oh, okay, that's cool. She's like, yeah, so what kind of music do you like? I'm like, oh, I like heavy metal. And then I instantly started switching the conversation to baseball. I'm like, yeah, but really, I just love baseball. I'm a huge Dodger fan. Are you a Dodger fan? Do you like baseball? And I just started peppering her with all these baseball questions, and she's just cracking up. She's like, okay, clown, you clearly don't want to be here. And then she gets up and 5 minutes later or whatever, and goes off and gets ready. And then, I'm in the seat a half hour later, and I'm slumped down in my chair, like, like a jerk. And she comes out on stage and she just nails it with just that monster voice. I think it was Greatest Love of All. I can't honestly remember. And she's beautiful in the spotlight, and she's getting a standing ovation. And dude, I sat up in my chair, my back got straight, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was sitting next to her. Yeah, okay, this is cool now. And I look over at my mom, and she's looking at me like, yeah, you're a schmuck, dude. You totally blew that. But the best part of this, Eric, is the next day I go back to high school, and I'm like, hey, yeah, I had dinner with Whitney Houston last night. What'd you do? Yeah, what's up? Yeah, hey, I'm me and my girl Whitney. Yeah, she's my buddy. Yeah, I was a mess. So,
at that time, she had a hit out, right? Was she pretty well known, I think?
She was starting to break. I think she had her first or second hit, but it wasn't really the stations I listened to. I knew of Whitney Houston, but I didn't know Whitney Houston. And, to this day, I blew my chance with Whitney Houston.
You blew it. You had your chance. Oh, my God.
So please apologize to your mom for me. I'm so sorry. So,
Chapter 2 is titled Let's Throw a Party. There's a full moon in the sky. You write about buying Def Leppard's Pyromania twice, Hysteria, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, Rat, Out of the Cellar, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, Cinderella, Long Cold Winter, Scorpions, Love at First Sting, Motley Crüe, Shout at the Devil, many more. I have pretty much all of those. We could hang all day and talk about these bands. You write, I made decent money, lived at home, had no bills, and basically just grew my bank account and bought music. Exactly what I did. And you bought it at Tower Records. So now I'm curious, is this the same Tower Records, maybe you remember this, that David Lee Roth appeared at for the premiere of his Skyscraper album? He was on the side of the building or on the top?
He was on the side of the building. I believe that was the Sunset Strip one. I grew up in West LA, so I went to the one near me, but the same concept. Yeah,
gotcha,
absolutely.
Gotcha.
Same story.
So you bought your concert tickets there, this is a much different time than nowadays. These are the days when fans would get in line at midnight, wait hours for a ticket. Now, it sounds like anybody under the age of 30 is like, why would you do that?
Why would you ever do that?
But this was an event. This is where you met people. Mm-hmm. You write that it was never boring, always epic. Talk about those days getting tickets, waiting in line for a ticket.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where I do feel like I'm old and have seen all the cool bands, because no one under 30 kind of gets this, but it was an event. You set your alarm for 5 a.m. so you can go down there and stand in line for 3 hours just to get a wristband, and then wait another 2 hours to see if they even call your number. And during this whole time, people are mingling and they're selling T-shirts, and other local bands are there trying to say, hey, if you don't get into this show, why don't you come see me down at the club down the street? Sure. People are selling, breakfast burritos. People are selling drugs. Boys and girls are hooking up and whatnot. And it was an absolute zoo in the parking lot as you waited for little Joe Tower guy who works at Tower to come out and say, okay, everyone get in line starting with number 153. And then if you had 155, dude, you were first in line. But if you had 150, you were at the end of the line, and you might as well just go home. And it was just a big social fun gathering event. And if you didn't get tickets, man, you didn't get them. There were no other real other ways to get them back then.
And it made getting that ticket even more important. Very similar to the days that are long gone of buying an album where it felt like it was yours. You felt closer to it. You get that ticket, and that, especially if it was your first. What was your first concert ever?
Elton John, actually. A lot of fun.
You write that in the book, don't you? Elton John. Yep. And the book is called I May Be Old, But I've Seen All the Cool Bands, One Fan's Story About Why Music Matters. It is out now. Ken, your time at A&M Records proved to be well worth it. A new CD almost every day, and you discovered quite a few bands who went on to become huge during that time.
Yeah, this was, I consider my musical journey in sort of 3 steps. The first one was, like I said, whatever radio was shoveling to me when I was, a young lad. Then I discovered Def Leppard and the 80s heavy metal scene, and even, grunge music of the early 90s and whatnot. But it was really at A&M Records when I discovered that there's so much other amazing music out there that's not getting played on radio, that's not even getting played on college radio sometimes. And it's okay to like them too. It's okay to go see them in a club with 10 other people as opposed to going to see Bon Jovi with 50,000 people. And at A&M Records, I would sit in the conference room and I would mail out Gin Blossom CDs to every radio station in the country so they could play I Found Out About You. Great, fine, wonderful song. But at the same time, we were listening to Swerve Driver and Motocaster and Therapy and Caius and all these just cool Monster Magnet, all these just cool bands that, that deserved a little bit more and should have had more airplay, but it's a business and they just didn't. But it kind of opened my world and opened my eyes to other stuff. So to the point where these days, if I didn't know you, Eric, and we were standing in line at a Starbucks and talking music, and you say, "Hey, did you hear about this new band?" I'd be like, "No, I'm going to go check them out because you recommended them." I wouldn't have done that before A&M Records. So it really kind of opened my world a bit.
One of my all-time favorite bands is an A&M, former A&M artist, Blues Traveler.
Oh, love them.
Yeah. You have any Blues Traveler stories? Do those guys come through the building at any time?
I don't remember meeting them. 4 was a big album back then around that time. I still prefer Travelers and Thieves. I think it's a much better album, but I've seen Blues Traveler 3 or 4 times. I do have one funny A&M story, which is in the book, but I'll say it here. This was back really before email existed, and my boss said, "Hey, Ken, get this note over to so-and-so across the lot. He needs to get this right away." So I, run down the stairs, and I'm running across the lot, and I jump up a whole bunch of stairs to go give this to this guy. And I wasn't paying attention to where I was going, and I was standing on the top of the stairs was the entire band of Soundgarden. And I literally almost ran into Kim Thale and Chris Cornell, and I kind of stood back and made some cheesy joke about, "Oh, I'm just hustling for the boss." And they just kind of looked at me with their death stares and walked away.
Oh, that's classic. Now, this would be around 94?
Yeah, so Super Unknown. They were there to promote Super Unknown somehow, which was a monster album for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, so they were not unknowns.
Exactly. And here comes this stupid, scrawny kid running right at them at full speed, not knowing, not even looking. And they're like, "Get out of the way, you jerk." It was great.
Well, this is the time of year. We're on Halloween time that you must be jonesing for some Oingo Boingo. You devote some ink to this band, who, by the way, was fronted by Danny Elfman, one of maybe my favorite artists in terms of movie soundtracks. I would think so. He has gone on to having a huge career as a movie soundtrack guy. Batman 1989, Edward Scissorhands, Nightmare Before Christmas, among many others. Now, I'm the guy, Ken, as you write in the book, knew this band from the Rodney Dangerfield movie Back to School and the theme song to the movie Weird Science. That's them. So where you lived, they were huge, huh? Oingo Boingo.
They were it. They were the SoCal party band for about 10 years. And I don't think I missed a show for about 10 years. And I'll be honest, I'm not even sure I do them justice in this chapter because they were so huge. They were so, if you wanted to party, if you wanted to dance, if you wanted to meet girls or guys or whatever, you made your way to these shows because they had a full horn section. It's always fun dance music. It's a little macabre, and they kind of had their skulls and their explosions and their Dia de los Muertos stuff. And then of course you had Danny, who was like a 5 or 6 octave singer who was just amazing. Now, the point of this chapter, aside from telling my love for Oingo Boingo, is really to kind of say, look, everyone had these bands in their hometown, in their area or whatnot. My wife went to college in Minnesota and was a huge fan of the Gear Daddies, who had a couple minor hits back in the day, but she saw them 25, 30 times in college. If you were in the South, it was REM or the Black Crowes, coming up back then. So everyone's got that kind of experience, and that's what I was trying to relate in that chapter specifically.
The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. You had the chance to party at the home of Guns N' Roses drummer Steven Adler, and you played a little bit on his drum set, and you got some looks for that. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, sure. His brother and I worked together at a restaurant, and he was a cool dude, and we were just chatting music one day, and he knew and I loved his brother. His brother Steven was already out of the band at that point, kind of dealing with his struggles and whatnot. but he knew I was a fan, and we would talk music all the time. And one day he came to me and he's like, "Hey man, my brother's having a party this weekend. You want to come by?" Yeah, I'll come by. Thanks. So we go up to his house, and it's just an LA party, whatever, nothing special. And I meet him and a couple of his friends and whatnot. And I had maybe 10 seconds with him. I'm like, "Oh, I really love your drum set downstairs, man. It's so beautiful." He's like, "Yeah, thanks. That's the one I use for Appetite. You go downstairs and sit on it and play if you want." I'm sorry, what? He's like, "Yeah, man, go ahead. Go have some fun. Go sit down and play." "Oh, okay, thanks." So I slink downstairs and I sit on the drum set that he played on Appetite for Destruction, and I sit and I don't even know what I played, man. I was so nervous. Probably just some cheesy 2/4 beat for like a minute and a half, and everyone at the party is looking at me like, "Who the F are you to be sitting on his drum set?" I'm like, "He gave me permission. He gave me permission." So, and that was about it.
I do get that feeling though. You were that guy that you didn't care, man. You'd go for it. You'd ask somebody a question like that. What the hell?
Go big. Give it a shot, right? So,
yeah. And which reminds me, there's another great story in the book. You took to rap pretty quickly, which is cool. You quote Dick Clark in the book. "Anyone that sells almost 1 million copies of his CD in 1 week deserves to be listened to." And that's true. Talk about the time when you discovered rap and the kind of reactions you got from some of the people, because there was a time where I know for me, a white guy from New England is saying he likes Tupac. That would get some looks. Nowadays, the rap fan base, it's integrated, which is great. But there was a time early on that wasn't so. You write about the time you went to an Ice Cube concert.
Yeah, going back to the early part of rap, I was a skinny, scrawny white kid in West LA, and I grew up with people of all different colors, so I didn't care about that. But I didn't have like that inner city experience that early rap always talked about. So when it first came out, I was on the baseball team in high school, and all the guys on the team loved it. So we would listen to it, on the bus as we would go to away games, and just listening to the early Run DMC and the early Public Enemy and the early Africa Bambaataa and eventually the Beastie Boys, which is obviously is a different experience, but it's still great.
Yeah,
great
love the Beasties. Yep.
No, love them. They're awesome. And it just kind of like, opened my eyes like, well, this I've never heard about these stories before. Why am I not hearing about this? What's going on out there in the world? So it kind of like got me to question stuff and have these conversations with my parents and like, why is Run talking about X, Y, and Z? Oh, well, Ken, this is what's going on in the inner city and it's not great and da 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 da. So it kind of brought that into my world. So it was a great eye-opening experience. I took a break from rap for a while because then it kind of became all about money, yo, and I was like, that I don't really care about that. Best of luck to you, pal. You're welcome to your success, but that just didn't touch me. But now I kind of go hot and cold. Some rappers are great, some songs are great, and I keep an eye on it, especially because my son absolutely loves it. As for Ice Cube, you might want to file this under not my smartest moment ever, and I guarantee you there was alcohol involved at some point. But a buddy of mine who was a Southern guy, a Southern rocker, we noticed that Ice Cube was coming to some club in West LA or Hollywood or whatever, and we're like, let's get tickets for that show. I got an idea. Let's dress up as cowboys.
Oh,
and
God.
We were both thinking of that, that one moment from Animal House where, Boone's like, "My man Otis," and the whole crowd just stops, and we wanted that moment. And that was just a really stupid idea. So we get dressed up in our, our dungarees and our cowboy boots and our flannel shirts. And I think I had on a trucker hat and he had a cowboy hat on. And we're rolling down the street and we walk into the club and nobody gave a shit at all because rap was about bringing everybody together and bringing, so all of us are in the club at the same time, white, black, brown, blue, and we're bouncing up to Ice Cube and we're dancing. And it was just one of the greatest shows of all time. And we looked like complete idiots.
Isn't that cool though? But nobody cared.
Not even a little. Like, hey, you guys want to check this guy out? He's talented. Come on in and check him out. So we did.
How awesome is that though? That's the thing. Music is the universal language.
Totally.
That's cool. I want to go back to Def Leppard. Because I forgot to ask, you almost worked for Def Leppard. You had an offer to work for Def Leppard, and you said no? What the hell?
Yeah.
No, you had a legitimate reason in the book. What happened with this? This is 1988.
Yeah, 88, 89. It was the In the Round, In Your Face tour. I went to a show and I forgot how, but someone got me a pass for backstage, and I went back there and I found the guy who got me back there. Then he introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone who introduced me to someone, and we're talking about my love for the band and whatnot. And he's like, "Well, why don't you hop on the road crew, meet us in Arizona, and you can come cross country with us?" I'm sorry, what? It's like, yeah, man, we need people on the road crew. You're a fan of the band. We'll put you to work. You'll be humping gear for the next 6 months. But why don't you come on by? Can I think about it? And so I went back home and thought about it. And at that point in my life, and this may be a regret, but maybe not. But at that point in my life, I was focused on getting to college and getting into the music business and whatnot.
How
and so
dare you think about going to college? What the hell is wrong with you?
Damn me, what is wrong with me? So it was a sort of a regret. And I look back at movies like Rockstar and Almost Famous, and I'm like, I could have done that. I could have been that guy. But given where I am today professionally and whatnot, I'm not upset with that way that I went. So,
and I'm looking at the cover of your book, which the picture on that cover is from a Def Leppard show in 1996, I think, right? That's from their album Slang. They were releasing that album. Is that also the same night that shot of you and Joe Elliott in the book?
Yeah, exactly.
Taken? Okay.
Yeah, they did a release party, a release thing for Slang, and they worked with KLOS, the rock station in LA, and they interviewed and played at a fraternity house on the campus of UCLA. And, we've all been to fraternity houses. You know how small they are, and, they fit, 100 people and whatnot. But here we are in the back of this fraternity house with Def Leppard and KLOS. And, the first 10, 15 minutes of it is, hey, it's the release party, and they play one or two songs and they get interviewed, and they go around the stage and they interview each of the guys and they play another song, and then boom, they're done. And that goes out on the radio, and that gets sent to every other rock station in the country and whatnot. But Def Leppard was cool, and they're like, hey, thank you guys for being here. We're going to play another half dozen songs for you. So thank you for being here, and let's get ready to rock. And they played all the hits, and we went batshit crazy and had a great time. And at one point in the evening, I handed my little automatic camera to Joe Elliott up on stage, and I'm like, yeah, take my picture. And he took a picture of me, and that's what's on the cover.
What do you think of Def Leppard's 90s work, 2000s work? Because music changed so much in the 90s. I worked at a radio station when Slang came out, and that music was very different than what they had been doing, and it was still different from what was hip and in at that time. They were trying to change.
Yeah, they were trying to change, and they admit that they struggled mightily, and they put out stuff that might have been behind the curve or experimental stuff that was ahead of the curve, and their sales slumped because of it. It's not in their entire catalog. It's probably not their best moments, but I as a fan, I still find nuggets on every album. White Lightning is one of my favorite songs of all time. Songs from the Sparkle Lounge is a great album.
Thank you, because that got such bad reviews, and I thought it was good.
I thought it was great, and they did that covers album too, which I thought was fantastic. Yeah, I think it was called. Yeah. So, and that's just them having fun with their heroes like Mott the Hoople and David Bowie and whatever. So, in my opinion, at this point, they've been doing it for 40 years. Any band has been doing it this long. If they want to go out and do Sheryl Crow covers for an album, great. You deserve it. You've earned it. Go have fun. So.
Yeah. What's cool about them too is Joe Elliott has been asked about this. Why don't you guys break up just so you can have a big reunion tour? And he said, why would we do that? We're just going to keep going. And that's what they did right through the 90s when things were changing. And that last album, the self-titled one from 2015, highly recommended if those listening haven't given that one a listen.
Agreed. It's a great album. There's some great rock songs on there, and they even is that the album where they do a duet with Tim McGraw or it's some big country artist.
That song's from the Sparkle Lounge. They do 9 Lives with Tim McGraw.
Correct. That's a great song. Wrong album, but great song. So yeah.
So let's talk about your last adventure in a mosh pit, because as an experienced concert goer, you have seen and done it all, and things can get pretty crazy, especially when you get down up front there at some of these shows. You write about your last adventure in the mosh pit ever. What happened?
Yeah, I think I'm done with the mosh pit. I'm over 50 now, and I think I'll still pump my fist and put my horns up and rock out with the best of them. But I've been in like you, I'm sure I've been in dozens, if not hundreds, of mosh pits in my day. I absolutely love the energy. I love the fact that there's mosh pit etiquette. That always just thrills me. That people, like the biggest, baddest looking people on the planet, will be like, "Oh, sir, please exit this way." It's a lot of fun. But the last time I was at in the mosh pit, I was at a Disturbed show with a buddy of mine, and we had floor seats and whatever, and the song "Inside the Fire" came out, or came. They started to play that song on stage, and I absolutely love that song by Disturbed. It's just a good rocker. It's a lot of fun. And I'm like 48 at the time or whatever. And I'm like, screw it. I'm going to go and do this one more time. I'm going to get in the mosh pit. And I hand my buddy my glasses and my watch and my wallet. And I jump right in. And Eric, I swear to you, I don't think I even made it half a turn before I got pushed from behind, and I'm heading towards the ground. And as I'm heading towards the ground, someone's knee or boot or heel hit me square in the face, like Bruce Lee, Jean-Claude Van Damme couldn't have done it any better. And I froze. I actually stopped hearing the music for a minute, and I'm on all fours in the mosh pit. And the only thing I can relate it to for guys like us is, you remember those old cartoons where Sylvester had all the Tweety birds kind of flying around his head? I had that moment. And sure enough, because of mosh pit etiquette, someone picked me up by my arms, kind of threw me to the side, and I kind of stumbled back over to my friend, who looked at me and he's like, "That was hilarious." So I'm like, "Thanks, buddy." So
were you concussed? Did you have a concussion?
I never got checked, which is stupid. I should have done that, but I guarantee you my nose was broken because it was black and blue for a few days. So my wife likes to joke every time that song comes on. Hey, does your face hurt? Yeah, yes, honey, my face still hurts because of that song. Thank you so much. So yeah.
Man, yeah, that can get pretty dangerous down in front. You have some strong opinions on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in your book.
Yeah, look, I've been there. I've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It is a wonderful museum. It is a lot of fun. If you're a fan of music of any kind, go to the Rock and Roll Hall Museum, because it's everything we love as fans, and you should go. Where I get twisted is when you put in bands that may not be as rock as you and I would like, before you put in other bands that definitely are. And look, I get it. It's a business. They don't just want a bunch of metalheads in there all day, every day. They want to open it up to everybody. So they put in Jay-Z, and they put in Depeche Mode, and they put in these other bands that may not be rock, but it'll bring more people to the museum. And I get that as a business model. I really do. But if you're going to put in someone like Jay-Z, who's super talented, mad respect for his body of work, before you put in someone like Pat Benatar or Foreigner or Iron freaking Maiden, you're going to piss off people like us who are like, come on, this is a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Get these people in there, and then add a few of the other groups as well, instead of the other way around. And it seems to be tilting too far towards the non-rock stuff lately, and it kind of pisses me off.
Yeah, I mean, there's the business aspect of it, but there's also the politics.
Yeah.
And we know that has a lot to do with this. And from what I hear, the more bands that we love get in, the more chances the other bands like that get in, because each band and artist that gets in has a vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tommy James, going full circle here, the guy had 11 top 40 hits in his career, and he's the only guy that I know of, and your listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, is the only guy in the history of music who had a number one song by a different artist replaced by another number one song of his by a different artist, when Billy Idol and Tiffany both went number one doing Tommy James songs back in the early 80s. That stupid trivia alone should get the man into the Rock and Roll of Fame. But the fact that he's had a 50-year career with a lot of hits too. And the other point real quick is, as I was saying earlier, as we get older, all of our rock star heroes, they're not going to be around much longer. Mick Jones from Foreigner is not well. He's up there in years. He's an old guy. He's not doing well. Let's put him in the damn Hall of Fame before he dies. Give him that last thrill if he considers it a thrill, and get his fans up there cheering for him, one last time. So why can't we do stuff like that? And I think the politics and the other stuff kind of gets in the way a little bit.
There are some head scratchers. Warren Zevon is one I would think that those guys would have put in. He's not in. I would think Warren Zevon was like a critic's darling.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm surprised he's not in there.
You and I can fill shows of the bands that are not in this museum that should be in this museum, but at least balance it out. Like maybe my suggestion, because I do love the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It is a phenomenal place. Like for this year's class, make it 10 rockers. Say, okay, critics of our museum, shut up. We're putting in Pat Benatar, Foreigner, Iron Maiden, Warren Zevon, Tommy James, and 5 other rockers that deserve to be in there. And then next year we'll go back and do some of the other groups as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they can do that.
Here are some bands. I want to ask you if you think they should be in.
Sure.
This is just a quick search from a website called Classics du Jour, and they list 15 most overlooked artists by the Rock Hall. So how about the New York Dolls? Would you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
MC5.
Yeah, they were influential for a lot of bands, but I don't know if their body of work gets them in at this time.
Iron Maiden, we know that answer.
Yeah.
Judas Priest.
Yeah, them too. Those two are mind-boggling for any metal fan from the 80s. How can you have Guns N' Roses and AC/DC and Def Leppard but not have those other two?
How about the Guess Who?
Pretty strong band in the 70s out of Canada. Yeah, I would put them in, and very, very influential for early 80s rock.
You know what I'm thinking too? This isn't on their list, but Bachmann Turner Overdrive, the offspring of the Guess Who.
Yeah, same idea. Absolutely.
A lot of hits.
Yep.
Here's an interesting one. Sammy Hagar solo. I love Sammy, but I don't think so.
Yeah, the song Where Eagles Dare alone, I think.
Oh, Eagles Fly?
Eagles Fly, excuse me. Yeah, I love that song so much. I was just watching the movie Where Eagles Dare, so apologize.
Yeah.
But yeah, solo, I don't think I Can't Drive 55 is enough to get him over the hump. But definitely as part of Van Halen, without a doubt.
Oh,
or even Montrose.
Yeah, absolutely. Jethro Tull.
So I have a love-hate relationship with prog rock. There are songs that I like. There are bands that I like. It definitely has a place in the museum, but I'm not the biggest fan of Jethro Tull, so I'll remain neutral on this one.
Pat Benatar, we mentioned. If Joan Jett is in, Pat Benatar should be in.
And I know I've seen some stuff about the Rock Hall about the lack of representation for women artists in there. She seems like a pretty damn good one to put in there and kind of shut up their critics for a while. So Pat Benatar would be top of my list for any class next year.
Hell yeah. Kansas and Styx are not.
Nope.
Would you have one of those or both of those in?
Yeah, Kansas, Styx, Foreigner, and Journey, kind of the 80s middle of the road rock, if you will. I don't know how you want to call it. I mean, they're all just monster musicians and monster songwriters, and every single person on this planet can sing one of their songs. So yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
If I'm a fan of those bands, I want to go see a display about Steve Perry and Journey and whatnot. Why not?
If Journey's in, and they are, then the others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Cocker is not in. Joe Cocker, what do you think?
Don't know much about him, to be honest with you. I know a couple of his songs, but I don't know any of his deep cuts. And I will say in the last few years, I have spent a lot of time kind of going back into 70s rock, like deep cut Rolling Stones and UFO and Thin Lizzy and stuff that I didn't really know before. But I haven't gone deep into Joe Cocker stuff yet. So I can't really say.
I've become a fan of UFO. Good band.
Yeah. Very good.
Mott the
Very, very
Hoople.
good.
What about Mott the Hoople?
Well, they're Joe Elliott's favorite band. So on that alone, I'm saying, hell yeah, put them right over the marquee.
The Down and Outs. Joe Elliott's
exactly.
band. They play all Mott the Hoople songs? Down and Outs?
No, glam covers. They
Okay.
do Gary Glitter. They do Mott the Hoople. They do a bunch of other stuff. But that's just him having a blast with an ode to all his 70s heroes. So it's just a lot of fun stuff.
Yep. Motorhead.
Love him. Lemmy is a legend. So yeah, I think you gotta have Motorhead in there.
Absolutely. Dave Matthews Band.
One of the best live bands I ever saw. To me, their fourth and fifth albums sound exactly like their first and second. So great body of work, but I don't know how much breadth and depth there is there. So I'm 50-50 on that one too.
Okay. How about Soundgarden? They're not
Love them. Yeah. If you're going to start putting Seattle bands in there, you're going to have Nirvana, and I think Alice in Chains are in there too. Then you got to have Soundgarden. Absolutely.
Ozzy solo. He's in with Black Sabbath.
Yeah, I think Bark at the Moon and Diary of a Madman Enough were so influential that those two alone would do it. No, you can get into the No More Tears stuff and whatnot, but those two albums alone are just so huge that, yeah, I think you have to do that.
Here's one that's crazy. Bad Company, not in.
How the hell is Bad Company not in there? I mean, first of all, they're related to Zeppelin. Second of all, nothing but hits. That's a huge oversight in my opinion.
George Thorogood.
Oh, I haven't thought about George Thorogood. Yeah, you know what? I think he's got enough of an influence, kind of that bar band feel, but a great voice to boot. Yeah, I would throw him in there. Absolutely.
I'll give you 4 more. Here we go. Eddie Money.
Okay.
Eddie Money.
Yeah. He's got a ton of hits. I heard he was just the ultimate gentleman, and he was a New York cop. So yeah, absolutely, throw him in there.
Hell yeah. How about Boston?
Definitely. I mean, the biggest selling debut album in history until Hootie came out. 100% yes.
Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, definitely enough hits and enough influence into the people around them at that time for sure.
Here's another good one. I'll finish with this. Thin Lizzy. One
of my all-time favorite bands that I didn't know much about growing up, but I'm now one of the biggest fans for life. In fact, I even went to Ireland and stood next to the Phil Lynott statue and have a picture with it. And
oh, cool!
Just love that band deep, and they're so huge in every other country but America. For some reason, they had 1 or 2 hits here, and that was it. And I don't know why, but it is what it is.
Good question. Why? Anybody that wants to listen to Thin Lizzy and get an idea of their body of work, just pick out any of their best ever compilations. Start there, and you'll be blown away. Blown away.
Yeah, go start with Rosalie, one of my favorite songs of all time.
So. Rosalie, yeah. You know that's a cover of a Seeger song. Yep. And they do a great version with that. Yes, so many great songs. The Booked on Rock podcast will return after this. Ken Schwartz, his book, I May Be Old, But I've Seen All the Cool Bands. One fan story about why music matters. It is out now. Let's finish up with Chapter 8. You get into your lists. Here we go. Let's go through some of these top 5 favorite bands of all time. I was surprised to see Def Leppard was not at the top. Led Zeppelin, your all-time favorite. You got Def Lepp at 2, Guns N' Roses at 3, AC/DC 4, Pearl Jam 5. All right, so I'm going to give you my top 5. What's your thoughts on this? Van Halen 1, Kiss 2, AC/DC 3. I have Grateful Dead 4, Pink Floyd 5. Now, those last 3 can change daily, really, because I love Def Leppard, love Zeppelin, I love Tom Petty, Springsteen, U2, Genesis, The Doors, The Police. Sometimes it depends on the season.
This is why I did this chapter, because for rock guys like us, for anyone who likes music, this is what we do anyway. We sit around and we'll have a beer on your porch, Eric, and you'll be like, hey, did you hear the new Pretty Reckless CD? Oh, I didn't like it as much as the last one. What? You're crazy. And we'll just go back and forth and debate. And everyone loves doing this. And we always freak the hell out when like Rolling Stone puts out their top 10 guitarists ever and your guitarist is number 11 and you go on Twitter and you slam Rolling Stone. So that's why I did this, because it's fun. None of the bands you put there are wrong. None of the bands I put there are wrong. It's all just what we love. The reason I chose Zeppelin over Def Leppard, some of my friends have given me crap for that. Everyone chooses Led Zeppelin. You should have stuck with Def Leppard. And God knows there's enough pages in my book about Def Leppard. But I'm the kind of guy who, when a band comes out, I want to know who influenced them. So when Def Leppard came out, then I started listening to 70s glam rock. And then Joe Elliott's a big fan of David Bowie. So then I started listening to a lot of Bowie. Bowie was a fan of Zeppelin, the Stones, and the Beatles. So I started listening to a lot of that. Those guys were a fan of Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson and Sam and Dave and all that. So I listened to a bunch of that. And I kept going back to Led Zeppelin whenever I needed them. I was not feeling great. I put on Led Zeppelin. I was studying for a test in college. I put on Led Zeppelin. So when I first did this list, Def Leppard was number one. And then I thought, okay, let me play with this a little bit. I love Phil Collins to death. Jimmy Page is a better guitar player. I love Rick Allen. We've already talked about him. John Bonham is a better drummer. So pound for pound, I think from the quality of the whole body of music, Zeppelin's just the best ever. And then my boys in Def Leppard have put number two. And I think they would agree with me. So.
I think they would too. You mentioned the Stones. How the hell do I leave the Stones? I love the Stones. I could have them in my top five too.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, frontman, guitarist, drummer, R.I.P. Charlie Watts. He was one of the best bands ever, 100%.
I tell you what's cool. Give a listen to, if you haven't yet, they just put out a deluxe edition of Tattoo You from 81, and it has the original intended reggae version of Start Me Up that they recorded, and it is much better than I anticipated. For years I've been reading about it.
Huh.
I thought it wasn't going to be good. It was actually faster than I thought. For some reason, I thought it was going to be like a slow reggae tune. It's very similar to what ended up on the final track. It's got part of that riff from Keith, but it's different. You got to give it a listen. So I'll put it in the in our show notes page. I put up a playlist. I'll include it in there because it's out now. It's really interesting. But I love the Stones.
I have not heard it, so I would absolutely love to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, I got to sneak in a few more. Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers Band. Jeez, that's the thing. You could go on. I can't leave them out. I love those guys.
That's why we love music. Yeah, you're right.
Man,
totally.
Your top five least favorite bands of all time. Depeche Mode at 1, The Cure at 2, 311 at 3, Stained at 4, Creed at 5. I cannot argue with any except for The Cure. I love The Cure. They're in my top 10. Not a Cure fan. Not a Cure fan.
Not a Cure fan. Not a Cure fan, and can't stand Depeche Mode. Just some of that British synth pop stuff from the mid to late 80s just kind of just stuck in my craw a bit. But it's funny because I'll sit here and I'll rail against The Cure and Depeche Mode all day. But you put on like Susie and the Banshees, and I'm like, this is great stuff. Let's rock. So I'm a little weird when it comes to this whole genre. But just Depeche Mode, I never liked his voice. I never liked the fact that they played all of their instruments through keyboards early on. I know they're all talented musicians, and frankly, don't tell anyone I said this, but the acoustic version of Personal Jesus is mind-blowing and just a wonderful, amazing song.
By Depeche Mode? They put out I never heard it.
Yeah, they put out an acoustic. I don't know where it was, a B-side or something, and I heard it, and I'm like, well, crap, these guys are like really talented. Now I can't hate them as much, but I had to come up with a list, so they were my number one.
Okay. The top five bands you've seen the most. The Super Suckers, 26 times. Eddie Spaghetti, the Super Suckers. For those who don't know who the Super Suckers are, talk about them.
One of the most underrated rock and roll bands of all time. In fact, none other than Lemmy from Motorhead said, if you don't like the Super Suckers, you don't like rock and roll. And they're just a fun, kind of pseudo local band. You can go see them at a relatively low price. It's a little bit rockabilly. It's a little bit alt country. In fact, they put out some softer alt country albums because they love stuff like the Drive-By Truckers and stuff like that. And they're just loud and fun and obnoxious. And my friends and I back in LA were huge fans, and we would see them 10 times in a month or whatever when they played locally. But a lot of fun. Check out the evil powers of rock and roll, or the sacrilegious sounds of the Super Suckers for your intro into that band, because they're just phenomenal.
Def Leppard 16 times, Oingo Boingo 13, Guns N' Roses 11, Skid Row 10. I know I've seen Van Halen the most times. I think it's 8 times, starting with 1991 in New Haven.
Excellent.
The old New Haven Coliseum. Kiss probably a handful of times. All right, greatest show you've seen. Guns N' Roses at the LA Forum, their first headlining tour. Very cool. I would say for me it was Kiss in 1998 when they had the original lineup, because I never got to see that original lineup in their prime. To see them while they still had that magic, because by the early 2000s things start to fall apart again. Yep. But great band. Yeah, and I'll have to hang with your buddy there, Craig from Green Bay, because he's a huge Kiss fan you write about in the book.
Yeah, so Craig from Green Bay, he actually designed my book, which the design of the book is amazing. Yep. He runs a shop called Design That Rocks, and if you need any sort of design that rocks, go ping Craig. But more importantly, if you're a Kiss fan and you're in the Green Bay, Wisconsin area, and you want to hang out in his man cave, which is in his entire basement of Kiss stuff, I've actually stayed in that room. It's phenomenal. go knock on his door and say, hey man, I brought some beer. Let's talk about Kiss. And he'll do it. His wife may kill me, but he'll be happy to sit there and talk Kiss with you all day long because he's the biggest fan on the planet. I think he's seen them in the 20s or 30s or something like that. It's phenomenal. So,
that's awesome.
And he's the kind of guy who, like, he searches the internet for obscure Kiss stuff. And again, to bring this full circle, and I didn't know this until I knew Craig, but apparently Gene and Paul sang on a Tommy James and the Shondells record.
Really?
And I had no idea. Yeah. So if you watch the Kiss documentary that just came out a couple of months ago, they talked about just hanging out in the lobby of the studio, waiting to do any sort of background ooh la la, stuff that anybody needed who was recording at that time. And it just so happened Tommy James was recording an album, and he needed some ooh la la background guys for a song called Celebration. And Gene and Paul are on that record before Kiss blew up. So Craig found a copy of that on single, which is apparently very hard to find. And I saw it on all his Kiss Facebook page stuff, and he was happy as a clam. So if you want to hang out and talk about stuff like that, go ping Craig in Green Bay. You'll have a good time.
Hell yeah. I see it here. Tommy James Celebration with Kiss members Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. And this is before they became famous in Kiss. This is even probably before they formed Wicked Lester, the pre-Kiss band.
Yeah, it's somewhere around that era. And I mean, I'm just trying to imagine, because I've known Tommy my whole life, but I'm just trying to imagine him in the booth with Gene and Paul doing some sort of song. And it just kind of cracks me up every time I think about it.
Wow, 1972. Before I ask you about that GNR show, I want to say my second favorite is Van Halen 2007, Mohegan Sun in Connecticut with Diamond Dave back in the band. That would be
I saw that tour.
Okay.
That was so great. I'm so glad I did it, because I know they've been in and out for decades before that, but that was such a fun show.
Yeah. So tell me about that GNR show, the LA Forum. What made it the greatest show you've ever seen?
Well, they were the biggest band on the planet at the time. I was a huge fan. I actually somehow got like 8th row center seats. And I'll never forget Axl saying, because it was their first night headlining LA, and he's like, "Look, fans, we're so happy you're here. I got to tell you, every show we've ever done is leading up to tonight, and every show after this just won't mean as much. So thank you for being here." And then they kicked off into Mr. Brownstone or Night Train or something, and the crowd went bonkers, and I couldn't hear anything for 3 days, and it was just wonderful.
What year?
This was their first headlining tour was the Use Your Illusion tour, I believe, because they opened for Aerosmith and other bands during Appetite. So this was 90, 91-ish. I'd have to go back and look.
How does Saturday, August 3rd, 1991 sound? Does that sound right?
That sounds spot on. Yep, absolutely.
When was the last time you saw GNR? Have you seen this current incarnation of the band?
I saw. It's been a few years. I didn't see the tour that just ended recently. I saw they played at actually a local club in DC, but that was when he had like Buckethead and the guy from the Replacements in the band, and it was kind of that weird mix, still doing Guns N' Roses songs and still sounding great, but it wasn't Slash and it wasn't the original band, which part of me didn't care, but part of me did. So it's been about 5, 6, 7 years, I think.
They just finished a set of dates with Wolfgang Van Halen's band, Mammoth WVH. Have you listened to
Great CD.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, love it.
Great CD. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
Mammoth WVH is the self-titled debut from Wolfgang, and his dad was not exaggerating all those years when he said, "Wait till you hear what my son can do." Yeah, he's looking down, smiling.
Totally, and I love that about Eddie Van Halen. He's like, go make your own music, man. Don't make mine. You do what you want, and I'll support you 100%. And it's a really, really amazing debut album. So good for him.
And Wolfgang takes no shit from anybody on social media. That's the greatest.
For anybody listening, you need to follow Wolfie Van Halen on social, because he rips people apart, and deservedly so. So. If you're trying to be a jerk to Wolfgang, knock it off.
Yeah, because he admitted to being hurt by that back in 2007 when he first joined the band, and he learned to deal with it. To be honest, to be fair too, he's just as cool with those who are cool with him. He's not looking just to attack people. He'll be cool with you if you are respectful to him. But if you're not, get ready. Get ready, because
and don't ask him to play Panama because he will rip you
apart.
apart.
Yeah, he posted a picture of here's my set list, and it was like Panama 15 times. Your least favorite show, Kings of Leon at Jiffy Lube Live. I like Kings of Leon, but why was this your least favorite concert? What happened?
I like them too. Their first two albums were great. I love, the Southern rock bluesy feel from a lot of bands. They had nothing that show. They had no energy. They didn't, look, not every band can be Kiss. Not every band should try and be Kiss. I don't need blood and explosions and fire and whatever for every band, but engage with me a little bit. Talk to the audience. Say thanks for being here. Tell us a story about why this song is important to you, about why you wrote it, about some girl you broke up with. Something. Give us something. They really just went from song to song to song to song, and I just felt like I could have just sat in my car and listened to the CD.
Wow.
I would have had the exact same experience. And I do like them. I think they're amazingly talented, and I still love their music. But that one I just left going, well, what was the point? So I felt kind of bummed about that, and kind of like the least favorite band list. I had to pick one, and that was the one I picked.
Yeah. All right. Top 5 bands you wish you saw: Nirvana 1, Prince 2, David Bowie 3, Scorpions 4, who, by the way, will be doing some shows in Germany with Wolfgang's band, Mammoth WVH, in June. UFO 5. I've told the story about the night Nirvana played down the road from me in New Haven, Connecticut. This was when I was in college. And Ken, I had no idea they were even playing there. This is pre-internet. This is fall of 91.
Right.
This is just like literally months, if not weeks, if not days before they blew up with the Nevermind album. They played in a tiny club called The Moon, which is, I think, a bank now. I never knew about it, and that is one I wish I went to. And it's on YouTube. If you look for it, it's there. There's like 100 people in the room, and I think they played Teen Spirit in that set. It is mind blowing to think they were that close to me. I could have walked from my dorm.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, too many bands like this. Prince, David Bowie are legends that I just missed. Scorpions, might still have a chance because they're on like the 10th year of their reunion or their farewell tour, right?
Yeah.
So. UFO is a band that I'll be honest, I got into it because of Eddie Trunk. He always talks about them.
Same here.
And I'm like, oh, I know Lights Out in London, but let me go dive deeper into what they do. And they're just phenomenal. So I wish I saw them live. But Nirvana was a choice. And I was going to go buy tickets to them. They were playing like New Year's Eve, 1993 in LA. And I'm like, I'm going to go see Nirvana because Nevermind's the biggest thing on the planet and blah, blah, blah. And my buddy calls me up and he's like, hey, come to Arizona and party with me for New Year's. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do that. And I'll go see Nirvana next time. Well, oops, there wasn't any more next time. So I missed out on that one. And that would have been, I've seen all the other, quote unquote Seattle bands. And that would have been a nice addition to the list.
Anybody who's not old enough to remember the seismic shift in music when Nirvana came, it wiped out all of those bands that we love.
Yeah. And some of it deservedly so, but it's all about building a better mousetrap, and they had it at the time, and man, were they just phenomenal.
Top 5 most underrated bands of all time. You have Triumph at 1. That's cool. ELO 2, UFO 3, Super Suckers at 4, Thin Lizzy. There you go at 5. Thin Lizzy, without a doubt. That's a good number 5.
We've already talked about a huge fan of Thin Lizzy and the Super Suckers and UFO. I'm a monster fan of Triumph. I always tease my friends that they're the best 3-piece band out of Canada ever, and everyone's like, "No way, man, it's Rush." I'm like, "Yeah, I get it. Calm down." But Triumph is just his voice is phenomenal. The music is great. Their hits are. They only had a couple hits here, but they had many other hits in Canada and around the world. And again, in my push to learn everything mid to late 70s, which seems to be kind of like the best 5-6 years of music, apparently, I'm finding more and more about this band that I really, really love.
Top 5 favorite frontmen: Axl Rose at 1, Joe Elliott of Def Leppard at 2, Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam at 3, Brian Johnson of AC/DC at 4, and Danny Elfman of Oingo Boingo at number 5. No David Lee Roth? No Mick Jagger? I mean, Dave is at number 1 for me by far. Why Axl Rose at 1?
Because just like the concert I was talking about, they were the biggest band on the planet at the time. He was the biggest singer at the time. let's be honest, he had the biggest ego at the time, probably still does, but he was everywhere and everything in music for those few years. So, and I saw them a bunch of times, so I always put him on the top of the list. David Lee Roth, Mick Jagger, Sammy Hagar, and a million others. Absolutely, they can interchange with a lot of the folks on this list. They're not wrong. They're all just amazing, and there's probably a ton of others we're not thinking of. I never got to see Van Halen back in the Van Halen days of the early 80s. Like we talked about seeing them in 07, but had I seen them do it back then and for Jump in 1984 and whatnot, I probably would have put them higher on the list, but I don't have that personal experience like I do with Axl.
Yeah, everybody I've spoken to who had the chance to see Van Halen back in the day, they were blown away. Even some people back to the club days, which is cool. Brian Johnson over Bon Scott, that's interesting too. Bon Scott was a great front man.
Bon Scott was a phenomenal frontman, and I put Brian there exactly because of Bon Scott, because he took an already huge band, and that couldn't have been an easy thing to do. Like, hey, we're already the biggest band on the planet, and now you're going to come in and sing for us? What do you got? Oh, well, what he got is the biggest selling heavy metal album of all time. So I'll give him credit for Back in Black alone, just for coming into that situation. Yeah, and he's just, I've seen a bunch of interviews with him. He just seems like a guy you want to have a beer or 12 with. He just seems like a fun dude. So.
No doubt. Seems like a really cool guy. Razor sharp vocals on that Back in Black album. Yep. Razor sharp. Favorite front woman, Pat Benatar. Very cool. Legendary rocker.
Yeah, without a doubt. And hey, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, put her in your building.
Yep. Greatest guitarists of all time. Hendrix at 1, Jimmy Page 2, Clapton 3, Eddie Van Halen 4/5. I would put Eddie at 2. I put Hendrix at 1 because where's Eddie and any guitarist without Jimmy, who just blasted that door down and everybody else came through after him.
Yeah, I can't argue with anyone who puts Eddie Van Halen one or 2. I think, as a fan of the NBA, Wilt Chamberlain will always be the number one NBA player of all time for me, because he changed the rules of the game, or they changed the rules of the game for him. They raised the net. They changed a whole bunch of stuff in the sport because of him. So he's always considered the best for me. Jimi Hendrix is the same thing. When you're playing a club gig and, Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and, Pete Townsend show up to watch you play, you know that's something special. So he'll always be number one. And for folks of our era, Eddie Van Halen is the same thing, because every guitarist after his era wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. So I could easily slide Eddie Van Halen into number 2. I put Jimmy Page there because Zeppelin's my favorite band. So and I love all his monster riffs.
What's interesting is that Eddie was not really a huge Jimi Hendrix fan. He was a huge Clapton fan. Clapton was his number one guy, but he was never a Jimi Hendrix fan.
Yeah, agreed. And Clapton stands on his own, but he's also in some monster super groups from back in the 60s and 70s where his work is just phenomenal as well.
Yeah, people forget that tone that he had on those Cream albums, and before that, the Blues Breakers was so ahead of its time. And then I think he was the first that made that wah wah pedal a big deal too on some of the Cream tracks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Greatest drummers, Neil Peart of Rush. There's another one I forgot to mention. Rush. Love Rush.
Love Rush.
They just keep rolling out of my head. Neil Peart of Rush, John Bonham of Zeppelin at 2, Ginger Baker of Cream at 3, Stuart Copeland of The Police at 4. I love that pick. Matt Cameron of Soundgarden and Pearl Jam fame at 4.
Yep.
Gil Moore of Triumph tied at 5 with Matt Cameron.
Yeah. I Neil and John, I can interchange those all day long depending on the mood I'm in. They're both legendary drummers. I didn't know much about Ginger Baker until I saw the documentary Beware of Mr. Baker. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah.
It's hilarious. First of all, for anyone listening, I don't want to spoil anything, but the documentary opens up with Ginger Baker punching the documentarian in the face. And it goes from there, and it's brilliant. But his drumming is phenomenal. Always been a huge Police fan, and Stuart Copeland. If you listen closely, he's with his jazz rhythms and everything in between the songs. It's just phenomenal. Of the new bands, Matt Cameron is just one of the best. And I had to think, whom do I play air drums to the most. John Bonham, Neil Peart for sure. But when Triumph comes on, whether I'm walking the dog or I'm on the subway to go to work, I am playing air drums to fight the good fight and Magic Power and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, crap, I got to throw that guy on my list, especially because he's not that well known. So I threw him on there as it's kind of a tie.
Stuart Copeland, his brother Miles, who manages the Police, put out a book, and I was very lucky to be able to interview Miles. And he said, a song like Every Breath You Take, just boring to him. He was just so good, and he loved to do all that crazy stuff with the cymbals. But yet he still makes that simple beat, which can be done by any drummer. It's still him. Just the way he pounds that snare drum, it's him. It's him. But yeah, all that other stuff he does, especially my favorite album would be Ghost in the Machine, and the stuff that he does on there is insane. It's so good. It's so
great
good.
album.
Greatest bassist of all time. John Entwistle of The Who at number 1. Les Claypool of Primus at 2. Geddy Lee of Rush at 3. John Paul Jones of Zeppelin at 4. And at 5, you got a two-way tie again here. This is between John Taylor of Duran Duran and Steve Harris of Iron Maiden. John Taylor, very underrated.
I go back and listen to like Rio by Duran Duran, which is, a silly pop song from early 80s. And just listen to that bass groove and turn it up in your car to 11 or whatever. That bass groove is phenomenal. And John Taylor is just wonderful. I will admit though, Eric, the bassist was the hardest one for me because I don't know them as well as I know guitarists and drummers. You could have put John Deacon from Queen on there, Jeff Pilson from Dokken and Foreigner. He's phenomenal. I'm sure the people listening to this might come up with 5, 6, 10 other people that I'm not thinking of, and they're not wrong. I don't know much about it to add to this list, but these were the ones that I came up with.
What's interesting in what a bass player can do for a band and how they can change the direction of a sound of a band. Bobby Sheehan, the late great bassist of Blues Traveler, great bassist, had a great groove, and when he passed, the albums after that, you hear the change. I still love what they did, but it's very different. It's
completely different. I completely agree, and he was an absolute stud with that bass for sure. I should have put him on the list. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, rest in peace, Bobby Sheehan. All right, greatest supergroups: Cream at 1, Temple of the Dog at 2, Traveling Wilburys at 3. I love that pick. Neurotic Outsiders at 4, the Down and Outs at 5. We talked about the Down and Outs, Joe Elliott's band. The Neurotic Outsiders, I've never heard of. Who are the Neurotic Outsiders?
I think they only had one album. I'd have to double check that. They might have had 2, but it's Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols. It's Duff McKagan and Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses. And it's John Taylor from Duran Duran on bass. And I think even Billy Idol was involved at some point. I think he did some songs or some background vocals. But this album is not for the faint of heart. They have songs like Jerk and Nasty Ho and a bunch of other stuff, and it's in your face, like British pub beer rock, where when they're done with their set, they come out in the audience and they beat you up. It's a lot of fun, and it's gritty and dirty, and it's great to hear Stevie Jones do stuff outside the Sex Pistols. It's just a lot of fun.
Just one album. That's it.
Just one album. Okay, yeah. So if I wouldn't play that at your family reunion, folks, but I think if you want to sit in your car and listen to it, it's a lot of fun.
You're right though. Billy Idol and Steve Stevens, Billy's guitarist, was a member in '95. They are considered previous members according to Wikipedia. Did you mention Matt Sorum on drums?
I did. Yep.
You did say that. Yeah. That reminds me of the band Oysterhead. Remember that band with Trey Anastasio of Fish, Les Claypool, and Stuart Copeland?
Yep.
Surprising, didn't do well, didn't have any hit singles, but I don't think they gave a crap. I think that was just a fun project.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, at this point in their careers, if they want to play with their buddies and put out a CD, do it. I'll buy it. What the hell? That'd be great.
All right, let's finish with greatest videos of all time. Your number 1 is Looks That Kill, Motley Crüe. I don't have a problem with that, but there is no Hot for Teacher in your top 5, Ken. What the hell is wrong with you?
I goofed on this one, and I'll bow down to you on that one. You are right. That should be number 1, because when you hear the song today, you think of that video. You think of those stupid kids messing around in school, and whenever I hear the word tardy, I always say, "Well, I don't feel tardy." And so it's the perfect video for that era, and I totally overlooked it. I was thinking, dark metal explosions, chicks, loud riffs, guys with funny makeup, and I came up with that one, which I love that song and I love that video. But Hot for Teacher, you are correct, sir. Should have been number one on the list.
All right. Sure. Who made 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Looks That Kill by Motley Crüe, Foolin' by Def Leppard, Even Flow by Pearl Jam, November Rain by Guns N' Roses, which we should talk about, and Here I Go Again by Whitesnake, because everyone loves Tawny Kitaen. So, R.I.P.
Yeah, classics. Yeah, rest in peace, Tawny Kitaen. Yeah, the November Rain video is classic.
It's classic. It gets a lot of crap too. In fact, there's a whole website dedicated to tearing apart November Rain on how silly and ludicrous and audacious it is. And I've read that story and been to that website, and it's hilarious what they bring up. Some things I didn't even recognize. But at the end of the day, I don't care, because it's a great song and it's a fun video and it's the best guitar solo Slash did on Guns N' Roses, and it's just a good time.
Well, this was fun, Ken. Your book, I may be old, but I've seen all the cool bands, One Fan Story About Why Music Matters. It is out now through Stillwater River Publications. It's available wherever books are sold. Any website or websites you want to direct people to get a copy?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places to get books. You can do that. You can go to the Stillwater River Publications website. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at All the Cool Bands. You wanna debate music with me. You want to say, hey, why did you forget this band, or why did you overlook that band? And I gotta give a shout out to some friends of mine. They actually put together a theme song for my book.
Talk about this.
Which blew me away. So if you go to YouTube, you can find it, but I'll explain that. So I talk about this band in the book, Pincushion Jones, who I worked for a time, trying to make them huge. And Eric, I got to tell you, they're friends of mine, and I love them. So obviously I love the band, but this is one of those bands I don't understand how they did not get famous. Their music was great, their vibe was great, they're the coolest people, their look was great. It just all worked. And for some reason, they didn't break through, and I'll never understand why. But it's a music business; we get that, and it just didn't happen. So I wrote about them in the book, and I think I sent them a few pages to make sure I was remembering all the details right. And they knew the book was coming out, and it finally came out, and I put it all over social and did all the promo and whatnot. And they called me and they said, "Hey, check your email. We wrote you a song. We wrote you a theme song for your book called All the Cool Bands." And I was blown away, and it's silly and it's fun, and it definitely has elements of the book in it, but it's also just a great goddamn rock song. So if someone from a TV show or a movie listens to this and you need a cool new rock song for your show or your movie, listen to this, because it's just a lot of fun about how, like what we talked about at Tower Records. We're of that generation where we went through this stuff to go see a show, so we were so invested. Kids today, maybe not so much. So go check it out on YouTube. Type in Pincushion Jones, and you'll see the song. There's actually a original version and a clean version for radio. Hint, hint, radio if you want to play it. And it's just a lot of fun. And my boys, Jess and Dave, they threw this together with the band, and it was great. And I got to say this. If you want to hear Pincushion Jones music, I know that Dave has about 1,000 CDs in his garage in Woodland Hills, California. So once you're done stopping by Craig's house in Green Bay to talk about Kiss, go knock on Dave's door and say, "Hey, dude, I want to buy a CD from Pincushion Jones," and he would love it.
That's cool. Pincushion Jones.
Hey, they had a lot of fun with this. Like I said, they totally surprised me. I was not expecting this.
Nice.
I never got a dime for working for them in Pincushion Jones. So this is my payment 30 years later.
So that's and that's the band that should have been big.
Again, like I said, they're friends of mine, and I love them till the day I die. But even if I didn't know them at all, and I heard that Pincushion CD, it's called Violent Mood Swings, I would be like, why isn't this on every radio station in the country? Because it was just that kind of perfect music for that kind of time when it came out. And that's cool. It should have been huge, definitely.
All right, man. Thanks so much for being on the podcast, and best of luck with the book. It's a great read.
Thank you so much. This was epic. I really appreciate it. And as always, rock on, my friend.
Never wanna go to the show. No The kids don't know, but the soccer moms understand. If I could say one thing that sums up who I am, I saw all the cool bands. I saw all the cool bands.
Rage Against the Machine,
I saw 'em.
Van Halen and Queen,
I saw 'em.
Def Leppard, you know,
I saw 'em.
16 fucking times.
I may be old, but I saw all the cool bands. The kids don't know, but the soccer moms understand. If I could say one thing that sums up who I am, I saw all the cool bands. Rock, rock till you drop. I saw all the cool bands. Rock, rock, never stop. I saw all the cool bands.
That's right. No, I saw 'em. You saw 'em too. You're right there with me. Banging your head, blasting those horns, screaming your lungs out.
Rock, rock, give it to me is what I got.
That was Pincushion Jones and all the cool bands. The official theme song of Ken Schwartz's new book, I May Be Old, But I've Seen All the Cool Bands, one fan's story about why music matters. Pick up a copy wherever you get your books, and if you have a local independent bookstore, make sure you pick up a copy there and support not just Ken, but your local independent bookstore. A link to find your nearest bookstore on our show notes page. And make sure you subscribe to Booked on Rock at Spreaker or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can find us online at bookedonrock.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/bookedonrockpodcast, on Twitter at bookedonrock. The email address, thebookedonrockpodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact me through the website. And if you're an author of a book on rock and you want to be on the podcast, just send me an email. I'm Eric Senich. Thanks as always for listening, and join me again next time for another episode of Booked on Rock.